So he's in the tub, and he gets up, and he'll reach to the toilet, and he'll go, crack, 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 on the toilet seat. But the first time he did that, he about flipped out of the tub. I caught him, and he put him back in the tub. What does he do? Crack, crack, crack. Think about anything else you've done in your life. Oh, I'm bleeding. I'm going to do it again and learn from it. I dislocated my ring finger here when I was 15 years old playing basketball. It dislocated, the ball came down like this, and these two digits ended up on the third digit. It looked like a lightning bolt. So I go into the hospital, and I'm walking around, and this nurse is making fun of me, like, what's going on here? And I pull off the ice pack, and she's like, oh, God. And they proceeded to give me 2 shots of numbing agent, bend the thing backwards, pull it up over the joint, and then jam it back together. They splinted me and said, don't play basketball. What did I do? I tied it to the pinky, and I went and played basketball. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a man. That's, of course, what I will do. And if you look at the longitudinal statistics of men, here's the best part, and then I'll move on to the next slide, which is, if you look at the death rates, the amount of death split between men and women for certain diseases, trauma-related death, the men are like way up here, and there's tiny little bit for women. And then you get to like dementia and Alzheimer's and or Alzheimer's before dementia, and it's all women, and there's almost no men. I go, well, this is easy to explain. Because all of their husbands were the guys who said, hey, hold my beer, watch this, and killed themselves in this first graph, and then they just kept living and then could die of old age dementia later. So you do have to watch out for that, but you don't want to stunt that, right? You want your kid to explore. You want your kid to be in a safe enough environment to know just how serious some of these things that he's dealing with are. There's a great TED Talk recently about this, how like they intentionally, this guy came up with a camp for boys, and like they're 6 and they're like using power tools and using saws and driving cars in people's laps, because you have to learn the gravity of the situation. You can only do that by doing it. So, you know, you're supportive and you keep a long leash on them. You don't want to be a helicopter parent. But it's not a dichotomy. It's not either you're overbearing or you're totally absent and detached. There's a middle ground of knowing that we all wanted to explore. I mean, you can't help but explore. I was in the desert behind my house as a kid, coming back with cactus needles in me and a bad sunburn, and you know, running away from animals and you know, all this kind of stuff. And he's going to want to do that too, and your kids are going to want to do that too, and you don't want to stifle that. Girls want to do it too. That's actually, I mean, if you watch them at the playground, girls play just as hard as boys, just as hard. And on top of that, when they're young, they're pretty damn strong too. So at my playground, there's this like, it's a track. You can hang on it and go like a zip line, like you're some sort of a secret agent or a black ops guy. And the girls are doing it more than the boys. They grab on, they kick their legs, and like, yeah, and they go flying on the thing. And at some point, culturally, we go, that's not allowed. That's not ladylike. And you don't want to stifle either of those, because that's going to set them up for a variety of things later in life. So definitely don't want to stifle that. And then you end up with this. So this was a few weeks ago. There's my wife. That's me. Of course, and my son. You get through the first year and you're sort of like, okay, I think I've got a handle on this. But every year is different, because now he's a toddler. He's almost walking, and that gets him into all sorts of other trouble. He's opening up cabinets. He's throwing things out. His teeth are coming in, so he has 2 teeth, and your kid is just going to cry and scream when these teeth come in. Now, if you think about this, like if you imagine razor blades pushing through your gums, because you don't remember it, you're 1, that would pretty fucking hurt. And that's what your kid's crying about. Again, he's not giving you a hard time, he's having a hard time. And it's just wonderful. It's this very bizarre thing. All of a sudden, I can remember what it was like before I had a kid, but I wouldn't want to go back to that. That's me personally. I'm not making a judgment on anybody else. Everybody's got their own life to live. But I did want to have a kid, but I didn't obsess about what it would be like my wife did. Or obsessed by comparison. She probably thought it was just a normal amount of thinking about having a kid. So you'll have to do these photos, and that'll be great, because, as I said earlier, the days are long, but the years are short. Next thing you know, your kid will be like 5, and be like, holy crap, where was this little guy? It was yesterday, he was just born, right? And it's true, it's so cliche, but it's true. And so, you know, then the next adventure begins. I could come back next year and be like Fatherhood the first 24 months, and it would be a whole different set of lessons. And you have to understand that your thoughts can't be static in what you're attempting to do and parent, and being caring and willing to change and be fluid. is the best advice I can give you. I hope some of that stuff was helpful. Some of the stuff I've talked about was helpful as far as thinking about it a little bit more, sort of high definition poop smell, what active birth actually looks like breathing, they can't talk to you, they don't want to talk to you because it's agonizing pain. My experience, and Steve can corroborate some of the experience we had with having natural childbirth, and if you don't want to do that, you want to plan a C-section, that's cool too, you know. But is to kind of be informative, to tell you all about it. And you have any questions?
Anybody got any questions for Skyler Tanner?
As gross as you want, guys. I'll answer some specifics.
Skyler, do you believe it's possible to focus too much on trying to be a good father?
Yeah. Now there's a period of time where you need to. It's not an elimination, right? If you think about it like a pie, think about it like a pie chart. What you don't want is a spuriously stacked set of blocks going up to the ceiling with being a father being the only supportive thing underneath, and the moment that thing goes, it all collapses. That's way out of balance. You want to think about it like a pie chart in which you're varying the amount of focus for periods of time. I did say like that being a father will cure you of narcissism pretty quick, but it's short term, right? At some point, your kids are going to become self-sufficient enough to where you don't have to pay as much micro attention. You're sort of you go from micromanaging to macro-managing. And then, then you have your own lives. I mean, I still have my own life. Like, I'm here right now, and I don't have my wife or my kid here, right? So, because there's that initial period of just really high touch, high. And then you start to slowly back away, and that's something culturally, this is kind of the explanation of, Anthony will like this. What is the 21 convention? Well, early on, it was the under 21 convention. It was, how do you approach and pick up women? And now it's become, we live in a society that lets you, it's a melting pot, it lets you have any cultural, microcultural norm you want. Totally supportive. The problem with that is we have no cultural norm to shepherd us into adulthood, to shepherd us into manhood, unless you come from a traditional background. If you're Jewish, or maybe you have some other, you're first generation and they're still hanging on to some of those cultural components. We don't have that. Simultaneously, those cultural components serve not only to prepare the child for adulthood, but also to prepare the adult for the child leaving. The bar mitzvah is not just, hey, you're 13, you're an adult. It's, your kid is leaving soon. Get ready. It serves both purposes. So that I tell my clients, I go, the 21 convention is now, what does it take to be a full, complete, good man in America, in the world? And part of that is sometimes putting others' needs before your own, but understanding in this case that those are your genes. You are a rented vehicle. You're now passing those things on. You want those things to thrive. That's, if I'm going to be very biological, the real meaning of life is that. Get your genes on the next generation. Anything else is romantic. Get your genes on the next generation. So there's a self-interest in that, but on its face, it doesn't look like a self-interest. And eventually, the pie reorients itself, and you're going back to your hobbies at a fuller clip. So yes, you can have too much of a focus on your children, but there are periods of time where it's going to look like that, but in the grand scheme of things, it was the exact right amount of attention for the needs of the time. That's the being fluid part I talked about.
My second question, some people believe in when babies, like really young babies, they cry, they let them cry it out, and they ignore them until they stop. What do you think about that?
So there's a couple components with that. Typically, the cry it out sleep method is the idea that you just let your kid just wail in the crib is what some people take it to. But if you actually read the sort of original proponent of kind of cry it out, you can be present. The idea is that you'd give the kid comfort and kind of give them what they want if you pick them up, and then they'll start to become attached to only falling asleep on you or in your bed, because my kid slept in my bed. My kid still ends up sleeping in my bed. He'll sleep 6 or 7 hours. I'll get up in the middle of the night, I'll go grab him, I'll come back, and I'll fall right back asleep. And he falls back asleep too, so that's great. But he's sleeping more and more of the night without us. But early on, he'd be crying, and you'd go in there like, shh, 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 shh. You're supportive, you're not ignoring him, but he's going to cry until he stops crying in a supported way. Some people take it like, we're going to the store, adios, bro, you know? But it's not that. That's not what it is. It's just you don't pick the kid up. You don't kind of coddle them when they're crying, but you're supporting them.
Thanks for the talk, Skyler. I wanted to ask you more about how your relationship has changed with your wife and how that has affected your happiness in your relationship with her.
That's great, because that's actually something I forgot to touch on, and I wanted to. And that wasn't a planted question either. So you feel extra vigor? Thanks, snake oil salesman. But so first of all, watching my wife give birth to my son, man, tough. Like, my wife is so hardcore. And you gain a new appreciation for not only the amount that she can suffer, but just how strong women are. That there's this notion of the fairer sex or the weaker sex. Not at all. My wife is incredibly tough. And part of being in a marriage means you've agreed to a process. And so this is a kind of a time in the process where we're both having to move through the same space. And we've had to remind ourselves a number of times, it's not, I can very easily get focused on like the finances and on doing this and on doing that and on supporting the family. And we have to remind each other kind of on a regular basis, we are a partnership in this. And it's easy to think about, I have to take care of them, when really it's, we are working together to maintain this household with our mutual strengths. What I've kind of come away with more than anything, like I'm attracted to her more than I've ever been before. I am also sure of her capabilities even more than before. And in fact, she kind of is too. She's like, I've gone through that. Nothing is too hard. Nothing is too hard. And I kind of feel like it's a bit like that high intensity touch I talked about with my kid. It feels like my relationship with my wife is strong, but that might not be the same for everybody else. But in my case, I feel like I'm in an even better place now. I feel like we could suffer a whole lot in a marriage and go through really, really much harder times as a result of this experience, because this hasn't been a hard time between us, but it's definitely stressful and you're not paying attention to each other nearly as much. So your ability to come together and really focus on each other, you can drop the other stuff real quick. It's an interesting kind of, you do it. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes, you'll go a couple days and you sort of like forget to check in with one another. You're just sort of almost a roommate, and then you go like, hey. And you get back to, and it's beautiful. So yeah, I mean, she and I always, I've got to live longer than she does, but she wants to live longer than I do. So, I don't want to be married to anybody else. Here's, more dating advice from an 83-year-old client of mine. He said, he's been married 60-some odd years, he goes, you feel the same after an orgasm whether you're with Marilyn Monroe, right, he's 80-something years old, whether you're with Marilyn Monroe or some other girl, so why switch horses midstream? You are just not going to laugh, are you? So yeah, there you go.
Awesome. Skyler Tanner, guys. Amazing speech. Thank you so much. Yeah.